Good morning. We are so excited that you're joining us for our latest Future of Food series on women's health. For those of you who don't know me, I'm Lindsay Levin. I'm the newest venture partner at Bluestein Ventures, joining back in January. And by way of background, I was previously CMO at RxBar from early days through acquisition, chief marketing and sales officer at a high growth cannabis company, and a global brand marketer at PepsiCo. I also bring unique experience as an executive coach for entrepreneurs and their teams from startup to scale up. For those of you who are not familiar with Bluestein Ventures, Bluestein is an early stage venture firm based here in Chicago, investing in the future of food. We invest across the supply chain in food, from goods on the shelf, how goods get to the shelf, and how goods are made. One area of passion for me personally is women's health. At Bluestein, we've been heavily focused and bullish on food as medicine as a way to heal our bodies and move from treatment to prevention for all humans. But for all is an important call out. One demographic that's been historically overlooked is women, who make up half of our population. Some may say the better half. Women's health issues have traditionally been misunderstood, underdiagnosed, and undertreated, leading to suboptimal health outcomes across life stages. So I'm thrilled to be moderating a discussion today with two powerhouse women in the field, Melinda Ring and Belinda Tan. Melinda Ring is the director of the Osher Center for Integrative Health at Northwestern Medicine, and Belinda Tan is the co-founder and co-CEO of People Science, one of our portfolio companies. As you'll see, both are pioneers in the field of nutrition and women's health. And yes, we have Melinda and Belinda. I don't know what the odds are of that, but I'm excited that we have them both this morning. We'll cover a lot here, from defining the problems to providing solutions. And we'll also leave some time at the end for Q&A. So please leave your burning questions in the chat as we go. I'll now start by handing it over to Melinda and Belinda to introduce themselves and share their backgrounds. So Melinda, we'll start with you. Please tell us more about you and the Osher Center for Integrative Health.
Thanks so much, Lindsay. Whoa, we froze there. Okay, thanks so much, Lindsay. Yeah, so as you mentioned, I'm the director of the Osher Center for Integrative Health at Northwestern University. And my background in health is rooted in both Western and holistic medicine. So I trained at the University of Chicago Pritzker School of Medicine and trained in internal medicine, and then completed a fellowship in integrative medicine with Dr. Andrew Weil at the University of Arizona. So I'm board certified in both internal medicine and then integrative medicine, and have been dedicating my career over 20 years to clinical practice, teaching, and research in the field of integrative health. At our Osher Center, which is downtown at the Northwestern campus, we really strive to integrate those two things, the Western medicine with complementary therapies to promote health and well-being. And we have a multidisciplinary team, physicians working alongside acupuncturists, massage therapists, chiropractors, dietitians, and therapists, all under one roof. And the team works together to try to provide patient-centered care that addresses not just somebody's physical health, but also their emotional health, their spiritual well-being, really the whole person. And in addition to the clinical, we're very devoted to nurturing the next generation. So we teach a lot. We have a fellowship. We teach culinary medicine, which is very aligned with the topic of the day of food as medicine, and then working with the community to try to educate and empower individuals to take charge of their health.
Thank you, Melinda. It's incredible. Belinda, we would love for you to tell us about People Science. Why did you start it, and what are you most excited about right now?
Thank you, Lindsay. Thank you, Melinda. My career started, well, you know what, before I get into my career, I want to start with my childhood, which is where nutrition and health began. I'm Malaysian born, and growing up in the US, a lot of our culture was brought over, and my mom preserved it, and it meant traditional Chinese medicine in my everyday life, which I didn't label it as that until now as a practicing entrepreneur, physician, scientist. I used to grow up with these broths that were various dried roots, leaves, and fruits. It was like recipes that the medicine person at the Chinatown shop would weigh and put into this paper package, and my mom would take it home and make it into a soup. And I also remember growing up, she had taught my sisters and I how to make this, what we call date soup, which is basically red date, brown dates, and black dates that friends of mine from the American culture would come into the room and say, "Are you guys making a steak?" And it was designed to replenish our iron. So growing up, I was really immersed in all of this. And when I went to college and then went to medical school, I began my career in the Western framework of how we think about science and medicine. And it really didn't have a place for me to understand how I grew up. And now with people science, it's this wonderful opportunity where these worlds are coming together. And at people science, what we're doing here is we're building a direct to consumer health research platform that's bridging the gap of evidence that's needed in this space of holistic medicine, health, wellness, complementary and integrative medicine. And what it does is it puts on the lens of salutogenesis, which, as Melinda is describing her career, it's trying to look at health and well-being from the standpoint of the system that looks at illness, pathogenesis, which is how our Western medicine system is. And salutogenesis is where we want to come into the ecosystem to say, we can actually do more now to take care of ourselves, to preserve our health, and to promote our health rather than intervene only when something's broken. So what we believe at People Science is by empowering all people with an accessible platform to collect data, we can actually change how we think about our health. We can make better choices. And ultimately, we can build a more representative and truthful knowledge base about human health together. And the nuts and bolts of our business include two types of business offerings. We license our platform to any health researcher who wants to conduct clinical research studies on consumers or patients. And then we also conduct research studies for brands in the food as medicine space and CPG, health and wellness space, if they want to show any kind of clinical evidence about their products.
Thank you. I'm so thrilled to have both of you here today, and let's jump into it. So we're first going to talk about defining women's health. When people think about women's health, they traditionally think about reproductive health, but fortunately, the aperture has started to open and widen to include not only female-specific conditions like maternal health or menopause, but also general health conditions that impact women differently from men, like mental health, digestive health, bone health, cancers, et cetera. So I know this is sort of a big question to open up, but I'd love to hear from each of you about how you think about the different components that make up women's health. What does it mean to you for a woman to be healthy and all those pieces that come together around women's health? So why don't Melinda, let's start with you.
Well, we can ping pong. Well, I think you hit the nail right on the head. I think traditionally when we hear women's health, or it goes to like, well, then it must be about the breasts and the ovaries. And that is not the whole woman. And so really to me, women's health is just health. It is reproductive health and hormone balance, but it is, like you said, mental health. It's a woman's cardiovascular health, her bone health, and other aspects. So it's really the same. It's everything. But beyond that, it is thinking about where that woman is in her life, all of the different factors that are affecting her, and including strongly those lifestyle factors like the pillars of nutrition, exercise, sleep, stress management, finding joy, having connection, having purpose. All of those components interact in really complex ways. And so that's why really, for any person, but I'd say especially for the woman, we need to have that holistic approach if we're going to help women achieve their goals and achieve their optimal health.
I would add to that, coming from the researcher's lens, that we have traditionally in medicine and research thought of a woman as everything like a man except for the reproductive process. And from the get-go, that's already leading us down a bad path because we are missing so much opportunity to understand our actual biology. And what many of you may be aware of is that so much science and medical knowledge out there is based on the majority of data collected from men over many, many decades. So what does that mean for what we understand about ourselves? And when you position yourself in that moment of realizing, well, my doctor is telling me that my blood pressure needs to be within this range. And then you look at the data of why that range is said to be best. 70%, 60% of the data is from men and the other is from the women. So what happened, to the other women who are not represented in that data? So I feel like we're really at the dawn of discovering more about ourselves as women, and to look at all of the holistic aspects of who we are, as Melinda was describing, our communities, our psychosocial needs, our psychospiritual needs. It's actually not only women, it is men as well. However, it's putting on that lens of we're actually not men plus a different reproductive system. So I feel like it's an exciting time for us to be building this knowledge base.
Absolutely. We are not men just with reproductive organs. So, and to that point, women's health issues have been misunderstood and underdiagnosed and undertreated, leading to suboptimal health outcomes across life stages. So I'm curious what you both see or what you think are some of the biggest unmet needs or underserved therapeutic needs in women's health today.
Well, building on what Belinda said, while I 100% agree we are not just men plus some reproductive organs, I do think that one of the biggest unmet needs in women's health is around, both in the research and in the therapeutic, is in the effective management of hormone health. And that's because when we think about those hormones, like let's take estrogen, the big one, again, estrogen, progesterone, they are not just here for reproduction. We have those hormone receptors on every organ of our body. And so we can see with the history, for example, around menopause, with that women's health initiative that came out in 2004 saying, oh, wait, don't take hormones. They may lead to more heart attacks and breast cancer. And then for 10, 15 years before the data was found to be not well interpreted or misinterpreted, women were suffering, and they were suffering with hot flashes and brain fog and mood issues and developing more issues around osteoporosis and other kinds of things. And so I think that we need a greater, deeper understanding of hormone issues, which are oftentimes dismissed or misdiagnosed, and those just impact a woman's quality of life immensely.
I'd like to add to that in my experience practicing medicine, I feel like when women came in with hard to explain symptoms that didn't quite fit in all the boxes, in medicine, it's a very organ-based siloed way of training. And Melinda's been trained in a system of let's bring it all together. As a dermatologist, I looked at the skin, and yes, different systems impacted the skin, but if it wasn't related to the skin, I sent them off to my subspecialty colleague. And what we oftentimes do in medicine is, in women in particular, they manifest pain in very different ways that are hard to explain in traditional medical frameworks. And I feel like one area I'm particularly interested in, because I know people in these communities, is understanding pain syndromes in women, which I feel probably manifests quite a bit in all of these fluctuations in hormones that we don't have enough data to understand. And when I was training also, people who came in, women typically who come in with chronic fatigue syndrome, that was a diagnosis that was so hard for many people. And, I remember with my fellow physician colleagues, it oftentimes is like, oh my gosh, what do we do with this patient? They've been to so many specialists and no one knows what's going on. And that to me is the opportunity to find out what is it that we don't know about the biology, and it's likely related to all of these hormonal shifts and other factors that we don't yet understand.
Yeah, and just to tag on what you're saying, I agree that, because so many patients that I see are those people who are women who go to other doctors and are told everything is fine, like when they do labs, but then they're like, but I still don't feel fine. So something's going on. And one of the positive, I would say, outcomes of the pandemic, not positive, but positive in terms of syndromes like chronic fatigue syndrome, is that now with long COVID, presenting just like chronic fatigue in many cases, there is this increased research effort to try to combat both the symptoms and also dig into like what's actually going on. So it's taken many, many decades for that to happen, and unfortunately a pandemic. But those unexplained issues are really still a quandary for so much of healthcare.
For sure.
I
And
love,
oh,
sorry.
go ahead. Yeah, no,
I
Belinda,
love that
please.
you brought up that, Melinda. Long COVID is a really excellent starting point for us to start to unpack what's happening with all of these historic pain syndromes. It's almost like these post-viral, post-infectious syndromes that tend to have a prevalence in women, and it's really not well understood why. Yeah.
Well, we're going to touch on hormonal health in a bit. So I'm glad that it's top of mind for both of you in such a big way. Belinda, I'm curious, what areas of women's health are your patients seeking you out for the most now, and how that's shifted in your practice over the last 25 years?
I actually, for me personally, don't know that it's shifted that much. I just think the awareness has shifted to some degree. So I know you wanted to talk about it later, but I will say that hormones do lead the pack of concerns for what women bring to me. And remember that hormones don't just mean the sex hormones, that there's concern about the adrenal stress hormones, thyroid hormones, hunger satiety hormones, like, especially with all these GLP-1 drugs out there, blood sugar regulations. Hormones are everywhere in our body. So it's not just the sex hormones, and they all work like a symphony. So, I'd say what I have seen is more of a public conversation around issues like menopause and low sex drive and other kinds of things that were maybe more taboo. Or, it was just like, just struggle, suffer, whatever, just deal with it. And now women are like, no, I want to know what my options are. So that's really the change that I've seen is women are advocating for themselves to a greater degree to feel better.
Actually, so let's stay with that, just because it has become such a hot topic, and instead of waiting until later, let's jump into it now. There has been a lot of awareness around hormonal health in terms of trends of women's health, and on online we see a lot of chatter about it, a lot of influencer culture. And so I would love to dive in and kind of separate a little bit of fact from sort of snake oil. So can you help us understand what some of the, what are some of the noise and misinformation that you see? And then what areas of hormonal health that nutrition can play a significant role in?
You want to stick with me for this one?
Yeah, let's stick with you. And then I want to talk to Belinda about studies related to hormonal health.
So, yes, there's a lot of misinformation out there, particularly when it comes to like, this is the one thing you should do kind of thing. This is the magic supplement. This is the magic cure. And I've had interviews published in the New York Times. They have a whole series of like, what's the truth behind sea moss? What's the truth behind berberine? Is it nature's Ozempic? And they're all coming from TikTok. And I will say, for a lot of them, there is some kernel of truth. What we see, what I would say is the bigger issue is the promotion that everybody should do it, and a sort of an overstatement of what the what the possible benefits are, leading to unrealistic expectations, leading to unnecessary purchases, and at worst, harm if there is interactions with other things that a person is doing. Around nutrition, I think there too, nutrition plays such a role in addressing hormone health. And, while in general, I can say I promote a diet that's rich in whole foods and healthy fats. And I tend to lean more, plant forward type diets. That kind of diet helps balance blood sugar levels. It helps reduce inflammation. Those are just crucial for all health issues. They go anti-inflammatory all the way. I think the trends around different diets, whether it's keto, paleo, whatever, again, I think there's not one right diet for everybody. And I see women ping pong back and forth between whatever's the latest fad instead of going for the long term with a diet that's going to make them feel good now, but also maintain health long term.
So I want to take a step back, and then I want to jump into some studies of people science around hormonal health. Both of you have a much broader lens on health than traditional Western medicine, which is how you both opened, actually, your intros. Which areas of women's health have you seen holistic or integrative medicine be the most influential for women, and in what ways? And why don't, Belinda, let's start with you.
I'll come at this from our experience with people science and how we were approaching research and what comes to us as questions around research. A lot of the challenges with how clinical trials, traditional clinical trials for drug development and clinical research studies broadly in institutions, a lot of what is the premise of that is to have a diagnosis. So, I am studying osteoporosis. I am studying hyperlipidemia. So you have to start with like a medical problem. And this again comes at the pathogenesis lens. And then from there, you then address, what is the intervention? What are the outcomes we're measuring? Did this work? Did this not? And the challenge with that is it's keeping us all in a box and coming back to the lack of knowledge and understanding of the true biology of all of us as human beings, and particularly with women. We don't fit into any of those boxes. So where are the additional categories that we haven't yet discovered? So what we're seeing with people science is that people actually want to ask the questions of how do we feel better? And if it's how do we feel better, what does our health need? And it becomes these broad health and wellness categories of mood, not depression, not anxiety, but mood, sleep in general, and all these vague health-like terms. However, they still matter to people. And I feel like where we need to go is to start to collect more data. We have so much opportunity now with technology and passively collected data with wearables, the types of platforms that are coming out now, to start to understand the rich phenotype of who we are as individuals in our day-to-day life and longitudinally. And I feel like that's what's coming more and more to the forefront to us in this world of holistic medicines, complementary and integrative interventions that the marketplace is trying to offer to people. And brands want to differentiate themselves. The marketing is so shiny and glossy out there. And I know I, as a consumer, will either buy something that a friend told me who I trust, or I look at the packaging. So it's really hard. And the science needs to be out there to differentiate brands that actually have a quality product. And one thing I'll add too is that, to Melinda's point, when you read that something does X, Y, Z, it doesn't necessarily mean it works for you, even though the product is high quality and it's been tested to some degree. There is this fact that we are all different organisms. We all have various types of microbiomes. We have different genetics. We have different ecological settings where we live, our lifestyles, and all of this impacts what comes into our bodies that we take for our health and what the outcome is. So it's really important that we test on ourselves. And in a lot of clinical research, drug development for sure, testing is done in large cohorts and the results are generalizable, but they're not specific. So just because this says it's 30% better, it doesn't mean it's going to work on me. So that's something that's really important, that we feel the future, actually today, we have the tools to do that now, is to test things on ourselves to say, does this work or does this not?
Great. And I'm excited to get into more of that with you, with what's going on at People Science. Melinda, would you have anything to add?
Yeah, I mean, I would say I totally agree with Belinda. You know, these studies are averages, and a true study is an N of one. Like, we are all an N of one because we're so unique. And then even, you know, me now compared to me in 3 years, I'm a different N. Like, my milieu has changed. So so I think that is, I will just say I totally agree with that. From my perspective, in terms of areas that integrative and functional medicine have made the most headway, it has been in what Belinda mentioned earlier. I think in pain management, we're seeing integrative medicine now in white papers as first-line therapies for the treatment and management of pain and inflammatory diseases. I think also gut health, you know, is another area where integrative functional medicine led the way. You know, in many cultures like Ayurveda, traditional Chinese medicine, the gut is the seat of health. If the gut's not functioning, then health cannot happen. And now, many centuries later, Western medicine is like, oh yeah, hey, the microbiome matters. Oh, nutrient absorption matters. And so I think, like, it's funny because what I have seen over the years, and I wrote an op-ed about this, that integrative medicine, like, we're early adopters, you know, that the things that oftentimes are viewed as like alternative, eventually, when the evidence reaches that point, become standard of care, but the lag can be decades. And that's where hopefully it plays, you know, People Science can bring it, shorten that gap that we're seeing. So, you know, I think those things where we're looking more at root causes of disease rather than diseases, as Belinda is saying, is where integrative and functional medicine are playing a big role.
Great. So I actually want to dive into this concept of a true study is N of one more deeply in two ways. One is talking about wearables, and then two is talking about some of the People Science studies that enable us to study N of one. So, you know, we are seeing more and more women tracking their cycles and key health metrics through wearables. So I'm curious, Melinda, how are you seeing your patients change behavior or not by using them? And what's really the most helpful for women to track? And what would you wish they tracked? How should we be thinking about all of the devices that are available for us?
Yeah, I mean, wearables definitely have empowered women to take a more proactive role in their health, because they can get real-time data on anything from their menstrual cycles to sleep to heart rate variability. I don't necessarily have a one-size-fits-all here either. You know, I love some of the things, like, and I'm not affiliated with them, you know, like the Aura Ring for sleep monitoring. You know, even the simplest, like one of the earliest, the pedometer. You know, I had a patient yesterday who was like, you know, just tracking, just awareness changes behavior. So it doesn't have to be super fancy, like, or cutting edge, you know, some of the keto breathalyzers or some of the whole body sorts of things. I do think, and I think we are starting to see this, this greater focus on tracking stress levels and recovery metrics, metabolic sorts of markers. Like, to me, I think that will help provide a more comprehensive view of health. I do say, I will say, and this is from my husband's experience, sometimes wearables can be, you know, a double-edged sword for somebody who has, for example, health anxiety. I know, you know, my husband, he's like, I'm not getting enough deep sleep. Oh, like, what did I do? What happened? And, you know, so when it becomes a tool for positive change, it's good. When it starts to take over your life or create more anxiety, then I think the wearable actually has a potential to cause harm.
Absolutely. So let's talk a little bit about some studies and N of one. So a couple of questions for you, Belinda. One is, what have you seen regarding people science? And sorry, what have you seen regarding people science related to hormonal health? And then I would love to dig into the Women's Health Initiative that went live on Mother's Day around sleep and mood. So let's first talk about hormonal health and what you're seeing there, and then I'd love to hear more about that other stuff.
Sure. We haven't specifically done studies testing hormones yet. I will say that interest is building, and we talk to researchers about designing studies all the time around at-home testing to look at the hormones. So because, again, we're at the dawn of collecting data to understand what's happening, one of the advantages of how we can conduct studies today at home is that you can use these simple urine tests. Melinda, you're probably aware of these, that women simply, pee on. It's like a pregnancy test, and it can measure many types of hormones in the urine, and at the same time align that with the data that's coming from a wearable, whether or not it's an Oura Ring or something else. And from that, you collect the data and you can start to see the patterns. And there is a lot of interest in looking at that. And then other aspects too. I wanted to add on stress and resilience. There is a study that's being funded right now by California State. People Science is not involved in it. However, I am an individual as a participant. And I signed up because it involves collecting all of the biosamples that you might imagine collectible at home today: your saliva, your stool, your blood, your urine, wearing a wearable and looking at that over time. And I'm talking about this because I think it contributes again to this notion that we need more data, and we all need to participate, to be part of the data and part of the knowledge. And we have so many tools today to collect it. And one thing to add too about research on hormones and all of these, all the sample collection and the wearables, is it does get anxiety provoking, I will say, at least for myself. I have 2 young kids, and there was a certain time point in the study where I had to collect my samples and send them off because it's part of this protocol. And I was thinking to myself, oh my gosh, how do I coordinate this between, kids going to bed at night, having to collect my stools, et cetera, et cetera. So that is one thing to say about research, is it's not easy and it's not for everyone. However, I do believe that we can bring it to a stage where it can be more accessible. And to the next question about the studies that we're doing for women's health. So we launched a women's health research initiative on Mother's Day. And the intent was to bring research to a level where people could feel that it's actually not that hard, that it can be fun. And it's the initial step to launching people into this space of, oh gosh, I can do this, and this isn't so hard, and wow, it's so cool to see my results, and I want to ask the next question. And that's really the spirit of N of one research. It's really the spirit of what we actually do every day. I was talking to another friend who talked about their sleep and talked about the wearables, and how looking at the feedback from their own results on a day-by-day, week-by-week basis, they were actually making changes themselves, in their lifestyle. And that is doing research on yourself. That is N of one research. And if we can somehow document it in a way and collect it in a way that's knowledge aggregated, you can think of what the power of that could be to institutions that need to take care of other patients and need some more evidence, to build upon. So that's been really exciting for us. Really quickly, in terms of our studies for people science, so we're doing one on mood and one on sleep. And the reason we chose those are because they're not specific to women per se. However, they're so important to our collective well-being, our holistic well-being, and to the point where we want people to feel welcomed and to feel easy to jump into a research study, those two felt like health indications that most people could say, yeah, that could work for me, or that could work for me. And these are simple, anywhere from 2 to 4 week studies that one can download our app called Chloe by People Science and just jump right in. You don't need to buy any products to test. You can do meditation for mood, or the sleep one is nixing alcohol. So actually testing on and off in a protocol, how it can impact your quality of sleep. So I invite any of you who are curious to check it out.
And thank you. And we'll send out links to how to get involved in those studies afterwards, along with any relevant articles also from Melinda that you'd like to share too. So, so we have about 8 minutes left, and we have a couple of questions in Q&A, and I want to ask one more question, like formal question, and then we can jump into Q&A. So I'm curious, Melinda, at Bluestein, we are interested in companies that can solve unmet or underserved therapeutic needs for women through nutrition. So if you could look at your practice and say, oh my gosh, here's some of the problems that we would love companies to help solve, is there any that come to mind for you?
Yeah, that's, I think, and I think this is one of the questions or related to one of the questions in the Q&A too, is that what we really need are affordable and accessible solutions for things around hormone health, mental health support, and prevention. And, whether that's an innovation in a wearable or a digital health tool, or something that's accessible at a community level. Like I think that, we need tools to help people. The other related to that is there's a huge gap right now to get in to see doctors and even primary care, like at Northwestern, it can be many months for a new patient to be able to get in, and even longer to see integrative consult. And so, like Belinda was saying, the more tools that we can provide and opportunities we can provide for patients to co-manage and self-manage their conditions in a safe and effective way, the better. And so that means whatever the product is, it has to include robust education and support.
Which is so, contrary to some of just the influencer and just hot tips that are digestible on Instagram or on these more popular platforms, right? It's really more deep education that's important. Let's do a couple really quick rapid fire, and then we'll go to the questions. So Belinda, are there any studies that you would love to run right now?
On this topic, and as a woman, the one question that I've always wondered about is what is happening with women who live together, like in sororities, and they all get in sync. Oh my gosh. And we've got the tools to do that today. Imagine if 25 women living in one home could all have some wearable, collect their urine samples, do food logs, because they generally eat everything that's within the home. And what an abundance of information that would yield. I think that would be a really, really neat study to do, to start to unpack what's happening with communities of women, hormones that shift, and everything in between. I think that could be so exciting.
Absolutely. Okay, Melinda, I have to ask, I know we're all unique, but do you have any, just a good wellness hack for us that you could share, you'd recommend?
My favorite one is, and it's not a huge hack, but it's a little bit of a hack. It's just incorporating things into daily routines, 5 minutes or less of a mindful practice, of doing a few squats when you hang up from a call. So it's really that idea of, you don't need to necessarily take 20 minutes twice a day to meditate,
Mhm.
you can incorporate it throughout the day. Maybe you can't go to an hour-long Orange Theory class, but you can move more in between your calls, or even sitting at the desk, moving under the desk. So that's really the hack that I would say for people is just build them into your life. Don't feel overwhelmed by needing to carve out additional time all the time.
No, I thank you for that reminder. I always feel like I need 20 minutes to meditate. It's like, no, do it for 2, right? What, something's better than nothing. Okay, so we do have a couple of questions in the Q&A. They're pretty meaty questions. So I'm wondering, Melinda and Belinda, can you see them? Can you see the Q&A? Is there one that you'd love to specifically dive into? And I'm happy to read it aloud, whether it's from
Yeah, so, I'll
yeah.
say the first one is the insurance company seems very uneven when it comes to covering HRT drugs versus drugs for men like Viagra. Do you see it changing anytime soon? Some women can afford HRT drugs and continue to suffer. I actually see decent coverage for menopause HRT.
Can you just say what HRT is so that full audience
Hormone
knows?
replacement therapy for menopause. Except when it comes to Medicare. Once a woman reaches a certain age, for some reason, they think you're done, which is not what the studies currently say. They support the use of hormones ongoing, if appropriate for a woman. I will say that, for example, testosterone is something that can help hypoactive sexual desire disorder or low libido. But there is no FDA approved option for it. So we have to order that compounded. So I do think we have a long way to go when it comes to HRT, hormone replacement therapy. But I have actually been pretty happy, since a large part of my population is treating women around hormonal issues, that insurance coverage, when there's a generic option available, is pretty good.
Good. We have 1 more minute left. So I'm curious if there's any closing thoughts from Belinda or Melinda to wrap us up.
I'd love to promote more research participation, and it's not the same as, it's not only the way I'm participating in a study right now, it's funding research with the lens of a woman. So women funding research, it's women getting involved with designing the studies, asking the questions, women as principal investigators. All of these, from start to finish, of generating data and knowledge, is so critical in adding that additional lens of removing the bias of when a woman isn't involved in the data. So I think it's really critical for all of us to think about that in the context of women's health. And research is fun. Discovery is fun. And if you can find moments where you can look at results about yourself, I think that adds to more of the incentive.
And I will just add women on advisory boards. For those of your listeners who are focused on products or others to serve women, make sure at least half or more of your advisory is made up of women who can really understand the issues at play.
So I know we're officially at time. Belinda and Melinda, thank you so much. I also know there's some open questions in the chat. So if we have an opportunity, we can try to answer some of those now, or maybe send out some thoughts afterwards. We will send out the links to the People Science studies, as well as any relevant articles from Melinda. Are there any of these that you want to touch on, Melinda or Belinda, before we just officially close out? And or if we can also send some thoughts afterwards that are written too. No, we're out of time. So these are probably
there is one
bigger.
There's one, you're right. These are meaty questions, especially the one about the plant-based, lab-based, pseudo-based food products that are worse than traditional. it's asking about how current policy is working. I will say one of the, again, positive things that we're seeing is the White House Commission on Nutrition and addressing food insecurity. We're seeing it we're seeing policy in Congress about a bipartisan congressional that movement that was passed that we need, that requiring that future health professionals get trained in nutrition. So clearly policy is way behind and has influence from a lot of different factors that leads to how it actually unfolds. But I think we are seeing a movement towards food as medicine at a policy level in our country.
Okay. Well, thank you for that. And thank you for everybody for joining us today. I hope you have a great day. And this was a really thoughtful discussion, and I appreciate your time. We will
Thanks
see
for
you for
having
our
us.
next Future of Food series. So thank you so much.
Thank you so much, everyone. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.